what is happening now, in my view, is a neo-feudalism, where the Zuckerbergs and Bezoses of the world are basically becoming the new lord and ladies. And they're deciding, even when they do nice things, they're deciding what kind of schools we should have, what kind of financial aid programs universities should have, what kind of disease, anti-disease programs we should have. And what's so striking about this, this is problematic on several levels. Number one, a lot of these people are our worst economic sinners, reinventing themselves as our saviors. The idea I was exploring was this idea that we live in this age of extraordinary elite generosity, social concern, philanthropy. Every Silicon Valley company, it's not enough to just have a company out there. You got to claim you're liberating humanity. All the foundations in New York, every investment bank in New York that, or financial house that helped cause the financial crisis that now claims it's in CSR and help empowering the poor. The winners of our age in the United States are engaged in efforts everywhere you look to make the world a better place, do good, make a difference. However, we have the staggering and stubborn facts of an age of historic inequality that's not getting better, an age in which the American dream has become a thing that does happen in other countries but doesn't really happen here, and a system that is almost designed to make most people, to leave most people unable to realize their dreams and potential. And so I became curious about how is it that every foundation head and people donating billions, and Michael Bloomberg making donations, and Mark Zuckerberg changing the world, and Jeff Bezos doing what he's doing, how is it that we have all of that activity, and Tom's Shoes and social enterprises and Bono doing a million things involving red iPhone cases? We have all of that. And we have the staggering, stubborn facts of an America that doesn't work for most Americans. And I became interested in the ways in which rich people, when they step into the arena of social change, redefine change in ways that suit their own interests, defang change, promote forms of change that are friendly to winners, don't involve higher taxes, more regulation of their businesses, and in fact lean on things like market arrangements or win-win social enterprises or whatever, which is a fantasy that you can have your cake and give it back to, that you can do well and do good, that you can make a difference and make a killing, that you can be generous and remain part of social arrangements that are unjust. Yes. We actually have a system in this country for making the world a better place, and it's called democracy. But I'll tell you something, the winners of our age don't like to use that system for their world betterment schemes. Because you know why? They only have one vote in that system, and that is not enough votes for them. Yeah. So we actually have programs to make sure people are eating. We actually have programs to make sure people go to schools and that they're good schools. We actually have programs to represent people's preferences and translate that into policies that'll help people. We have robust mechanisms. They're not perfect, and they're in a bad way now because of...
You spoke of this. There was one point where you said essentially, I'll paraphrase, the market world Silicon Valley experiment was essentially blowing off the whole, what you might call, vision of the Enlightenment.
Absolutely. One of the ideas that came out of the Enlightenment was, if you think back to kind of feudal Europe, you had a bunch of peasants, and then you had a bunch of lords and ladies on landed estates, and these peasants farm their fields. And you had peasants whose lives were vulnerable to the whims of the lords and ladies. If they wanted to take this much wheat that year, that's how much they would take. And if they wanted to let you rent their thing, they would and wouldn't. And it was a cruel world. And part of what we built in the 17th, 18th century onward was universal systems through governments and institutions and laws, where your life didn't depend on the how much caffeine your lord and lady had that morning, whether they were happy or not. It depended on a set of universal laws and norms. And we built things like, eventually over time, public schools and Medicare and Social Security and interstate highway system. And so what is happening now, in my view, is a neo-feudalism, where the Zuckerbergs and Bezoses of the world are basically becoming the new lord and ladies. And they're deciding, even when they do nice things, they're deciding what kind of schools we should have, what kind of financial aid programs universities should have, what kind of disease, anti-disease programs we should have. And what's so striking about this, this is problematic on several levels. Number one, a lot of these people are our worst economic sinners, reinventing themselves as our saviors. Mark Zuckerberg presents as one of the most idealistic corporate CEOs in American history. He's literally the only CEO in American history who possibly tipped a federal election result.
Yeah.
I don't like the Koch brothers. I don't like, people who dump effluent into rivers. But I got to say, it was the guy in the T-shirt with a nice smile and a nerdy vibe and an inability to process emotions. It was that guy talking about community. It was that guy who actually compromised a U.S. federal election.
Let's talk about that for a second. Most villains in movies are conscious, sadistic, etc. Mark Zuckerberg created a system that produced that, but I don't think that was his intent. Nonetheless, that's the outcome, and it is to be criticized, and the happy guy in the T-shirt is a mirage.
A lot of us have been trying to help Mark Zuckerberg for the last many, many years. I think the guy's, ever since he was sued by his own business partners who he screwed in the early years, a lot of people have been telling Mark Zuckerberg, you're a little predatory, you're a little blind, you don't really process emotions that well, you don't have feelings, but that's fine. Like, there are things you can do. There's books you can read, there's people you can hire. The guy has been staggeringly, I know people who work with him, who have worked for him, who advise him. They describe someone who has this messianic desire to make the world better, who thinks he has figured out tools that are capable of liberating humanity faster than the rest of us. But when he hears from the rest of us, hey, it's not just that your thing's 3 degrees off. There are fundamental things about you and what you've built and the people you have around you that are 180 degrees off. He's unable to process it. And particularly in the Valley, you think of Elon Musk, you think about the Google people, these are people who are some of the most socially ignorant, inadept people on earth, who are now in charge of the tools,
the architecture of our society.
Socializing.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. These are the thing they are worst at in their personal lives, they're now in charge of for all of us.
If you believe in this system called democracy, you need intelligent voters. So you're investing in what you might call a side effect of education that's essential to the health of the republic.
Look, climate change is an education problem. Okay, the numbers totally bear it out. The percentage of people with PhDs who don't believe climate change is real is trivial. The percentage of people with master's degrees is maybe a little higher, but right? If you doubled the percentage of Americans with a college degree, there'd be no problem of climate change denial in this country. And then what that would mean is the world would actually have a shot at maybe addressing it in a way that right now looks unlikely. A lot of our problems are education problems in disguise, because the ability to believe in fake things is essential to upholding the kind of system that we have. Otherwise, how do you explain in a democracy a system that doesn't work for most people? It makes no sense.
Right. Well,
people have to be persuaded to believe in things that are not real.
Right? The democracy's become a plutonomy where the power of that vote is diminished. And the more you can manipulate people, as you just described, the more power the money has relative to the individual.
And I've been trying to help people see the connections between each of these stories. I was just saying today, we have a story in the news of Michael Bloomberg giving $1.8 billion to Johns Hopkins. Very nice gift, but why does he have that money? Why is that happening that way? Then you got a couple days before this bombshell story on Facebook, and how it totally looked the other way as the Russians are waging cyber war on this country to basically protect itself from government scrutiny. Then you got the story of Amazon running The Bachelor contest on American cities, getting a tax break for the world's richest man. Then you go back, and we just had the 10-year anniversary of the financial crisis, and basically now 10 years later, it turns out the only people who are fully recovered from it are the people who caused it. And on and on and on and on. these are all connected. And I think we are not who we think we are in this country. And we are living in an America that is the opposite of our self-image. If you stop at any red state, blue state, small town, big city, farm stand, and you say, what are your kind of central ideas of what this country is about? One of the things that will come up very fast in my experience is American dream, like whatever effort you put in, that's where you end up. This is actually less true in America than in any other rich country. The thing we think is our thing is like the opposite of our thing. Ours is actually the most caste, we are the kind of most caste society among the rich countries.
And by the way, the reduction of funding for our public universities, like University of Michigan, where you went to school and where I grew up around, or Cal Berkeley, they've ceased to be vehicles of upward mobility.
Correct.
And according to Raj Chetty's study with a number of colleagues, the University of Michigan now has more people from the top 1% than from the bottom 60 combined. Wow. As undergraduates, and that's 40,000 students. That's not some boutique college picking off trust fund kids. That's how they got to sustain themselves.
Wow.
So the whole, like you said, the mask is what you might call occluding our vision of what's really happening.
You know, sometimes you can have like a very bad disease that remains invisible in your body, right? There's cancers that people have for years without realizing they have cancer, and then it's too late. I think we've had a cancer for a while in terms of the veneration of wealth, thinking that people are smart just because they're rich, thinking they know what our schools should be like just because they made money in hedge funds, thinking that they, have insight into how we should fight diseases just because, they made a soft drink company and caused diseases. And that cancer has been in our society for a while, and it was pretty much undetected. People weren't critiquing these things. When Mark Zuckerberg a few years ago announced, I'm giving 99% of my wealth away, I mean, every newspaper story was this like puffy, like gauzy philanthropy thing. I think Trump is the moment where we realize we have cancer. And I appreciate him for that. I appreciate the way in which he has flamboyantly made visible many of the ugliest tendencies of our society. He is the incarnation of so much of what is bad in a culture that reveres money. And he's dramatized so many of the things I write about in this book. The notion that the people who cause our problems are best equipped to solve them somehow. The notion that you can kind of seek to enrich yourself and sort of fight for the common man at the same time, win-win. The notion that you can, that just because you're a business person, you have these special skills to solve any other problem that have nothing to do with your lane.
Well, I think the sensibility, we talk about new economic thinking, like it's this model versus that model or whatever, but you're penetrating to a different level, which is what I would call the emotional contours of who you want to be and who you allow to be the judge and jury of the meaning of your existence. And by understanding the context in which ideas are formed and how they, what you might call, resonate with value, it challenges us all to think about governance, media, what matters to us. You're opening up a lot of structures that people who just played my model versus your model never considered. And I think that to me, that's a very beautiful contribution that you're making.
No, thank you.
And it will help us all go deeper. Cornel West, the famous theologian and scholar, said to me one time, we were on stage at the Union Theological Seminary, and he said, Robert, sometimes you don't understand. What you have to do is get quiet and go deeper until you can come back out. And I think the challenge that you've issued in this book for all of the thinkers, the intellectuals, the scholars, or the people who think